These are some of the memories. These are some of the memories that bring me joy, but I would be lying if I told you that it was all good. Like most children, I had a rebellious stage. My first recollection of rebellion was at the age of 9, where I wrote a handwritten letter to the Catholic Archdiocese of Denver, demanding that they remove my name from their registry, as I had not been asked to be baptized and had no desire in being labeled as such. I grew up in a Christian home, and from the outside looking in, we were a family others looked up to. But behind closed doors, the sanctimonious performance was just that. For any type of abuse you could think of was taking place behind closed doors. Growing up in a religious household and then hearing comments like, don't play in the sun because you're going to get too dark, or hearing the N-word thrown around freely, or hearing comments like, go call the neighbor to come wash the dishes, followed by laughter, claiming it was just a joke. It seemed hypocritical or contradictory to me. In fact, this was the first time I remember speaking up about what I thought to be unjust and racist. I ended up getting beat for supposedly being disrespectful. I was about 12 years old, but even then, I didn't regret having spoken up. My second act of rebellion came when I ran away from my home. I was 15 years old. I took to the streets and went looking for love in all the wrong places, trying to numb my pain, diving into a pattern of abusive relationships that almost ended my life. By the age of 18, I was a single mother of 2 children who realized that I had become a statistic. Nothing but a poor, young, unwed brown mother who'd end up on welfare and public housing, food stamps, and living off of the system. I knew that the social conditions were not in my favor. I guess George Jackson was right when he said in his book entitled Blood in My Eye, I've been in rebellion all my life. I just didn't know it. I knew something had to change. It was around that time that a newer subsidized housing program called North Lincoln Campus of Learners had been built and was taking applications. My mom suggested that I apply. I thought it was a horrible idea. My pride wouldn't let me see how going into what was a low-income housing development would be good for me or for my kids. My mom, who had at one point turned down a full ride scholarship to a major university to become a devout wife and stay-at-home mother, finally convinced me to change my mind, as the program was right across the street from Auraria campus, and it supported its residents pursuing higher education. I ended up being accepted into the program and eventually was the first person in my family to graduate with the bachelor's degree. It was here when I first learned that all the history that I had been taught up until this point was a lie. It was here that I took my first classes in Native American history and Chicano studies. It was here that I heard the word Chicano for the first time. I learned of the Sand Creek Massacre, Corky Gonzalez and the Crusade for Justice, El Partido de la Raza Unida, the Farm Workers Union, and the American Indian Movement. A sense of identity and cultural pride was birthed in me because I always knew that being labeled as Hispanic, Latino, or even Mexican American didn't capture who I was at all. It was then that I started getting involved in local grassroots efforts and organizations surrounding issues affecting our communities. It was also at this time that I dove into my mental health career. This is what I do for a living. This is what I do by trade. I like to say that I work with, because I work with children, I like to say that I work with their inner child. I can say that I was conscious of the issues that affect our people from a very early age, and simply put, that shit just wasn't right. How come some people have so much while others don't even know what to do? That some people have so much that they don't even know what to do with it, while others have to fight just to get their basic needs met. How come brown and black people end up dead from simple traffic stops? How come people are being called illegals and aliens on stolen land? Why is it that so many of our brothers and sisters are locked up like animals? Why are our babies still being locked up in cages? But it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I started to become more politically inclined in my views and in my thinking. 5 years ago, I had started my master's degree and very quickly decided not to continue. I'm definitely not knocking those who have continued this academic path, for we have many chingones and chingonas on this very meeting today that fight arduously for our people en las escuelas y en las universidades. I myself like to say that I am enrolled full-time in the People's University, continuing to expand my knowledge and learning from the greats, our ancestors who have since passed, political prisoners, prisoners of war, and elders. I am a Second Rainbow Coalition member, as well as an avid supporter of Los Brown Berets. And of course, my dedication and commitment to El Partido de la Raza Unida continues strong. I live for my people, and therefore I know that when my time comes to leave this earth, it will be fighting for our people. Que viva la raza, que viva la mujer, y que siga la lucha hasta la victoria.
Que viva.
Viva.
That was amazing. Damn.
Gracias.
Everybody, like,
Hermana.
I was looking at the chat, at the little boxes too. People are clapping. I don't know if you can see it. People were clapping. People were putting hearts. But that was beautiful. Thank you, hermana, for that beautiful introduction. And a lot of, you know, everything you said, like, I just want to put fire emoji after every sentence that you said right now. And one of the things that stuck out to me, and just kind of your journey, is the movimientos that you learned about that helped you get rooted more in your identity. Can you talk a little bit about developing your Chicana identity and how it's evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think the identity, self-identity is something that continues to evolve, you know. It's one thing to say, soy Chicana. What does that mean to you? You know, like, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? Could be two different things. For me, it is definitely of, I know what the history is of this land. I can say that even before, you know, when I say I was more naive and less conscious, I would say that I was Mexican American, because that was the word that, like, was most comfortable to me. Even when I didn't understand, I didn't like Hispanic and I didn't like Latino, but Mexican American, I was like, okay, I could go for that, because, you know, my roots are in Mexico, and so I could go for that. But even then, I would say I'm Mexican before I'm American. Eventually, I came to say being American is really just an illusion. Who's American, you know? And so it's really more coming to an understanding of learning your history, which I'm still learning. You know, I say this all the time. I'm a self-proclaimed nerd. I love learning. I know that I don't know everything that there is to know. But I do want to be firm in what I do know. What I do know is that I'm a Chicana. And I love when other people know that I'm a Chicana and can articulate what that means. You know, she's a Chicana. You know, so when people say, "Oh, she's Mexican," no, she's not Mexican. She's a Chicana. You know. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer that?
Yeah. And I think something too that you touched on in your introduction, you know, just like even with your Chicana identity and what you're doing in terms of your work that you do with children, and you talked about a little bit about like the inner child, and you know, we hear this concept of like self-love, and I think, you know, I think you when you were talking right now, like, being Chicana is a form of, you know, self-love, I feel, you know, and it's everybody has a different meaning to it, but what is that, how does that encompass revolutionary love, that identity, that self-love, like how does it all like get woven into revolutionary love?
Well, I feel like if you don't, you know, and we hear this all the time, you can't love others if you don't love yourself. I think for oppressed peoples, there's layers to that. You know, there's so many layers of healing. So guess what? If I get to the point, if I decide I can't love on other people until I'm fully healed, and then I'll never. I don't know that I'll ever fully get there. I
Yeah.
know that my healing comes in stages, but the identity piece of it is definitely the start. Um, Again, and we've had this conversation so many times where we can all pinpoint the time when we first uh, came across, whether because not everybody grew up in or fortunate enough to grow up with people who were already in the movimiento and active. For myself, that was not the case. So for me, it was having to ask a lot of questions. Specific questions about our family. Some of those questions got answered, some didn't. But what I did see, that the ones that didn't get answered weren't always necessarily because the answer wasn't known, but because there was so much pain and shame around the context of that. So, I remember as a child asking questions and being told, like, Mija, yeah. You ask too many questions, just let it be. And so for me, it's an involvement of where did I come from? And a big question too is the why. Why am I the way that I am? Why are things the way that they are? Like, it just wasn't enough for me to accept that things are just the way they are, just because, that I feel there's explanations for it all. Maybe not necessarily excuses, but there's explanations. So I think once we start getting some of those answers for ourselves that inform our own identity, then that has, for me personally, allowed me to be able to step outside of my own experience and to extend that compassion and that love for other people and their struggles that may or may not be, my struggle,
Mm,
you know?
yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So our topic today is revolutionary love. Um, so what does that encompass? What does that mean to you?
I mean, I think the first part is that self-identity, knowing who you are, taking responsibility for your own healing, because whatever it is, we all have traumas, whatever. And you'll hear me speak a lot on this because I am by trade in the mental health field, and so that is always a constant for me. But we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our children, to our communities, to our people, to heal. And so that would be the first thing. But then the second thing is to not put ourselves in a bubble, because sometimes when we are in pain and we are healing, it's very easy to isolate ourselves, and that's not conducive to healing either. um I feel like revolutionary love is the ways of our people, which is communal, and it's circular. Our healing is circular. We don't heal in a linear fashion, like Western medicine says. Do A and B will follow. Then do B, and then after you've done therapy for so long, then maybe you can do C. Our healing is not that way. We heal when we share our stories. We heal when we listen empathetically without judgment, when we really truly listen to try to understand where someone is coming from. And it's so hard to do that because the way that things are now, everything is so based on the individual and not the collective,
Yeah.
and also the blaming of, whose fault is it, whose fault is it that this happened. And so I think for us, it's expanding our mind to look at things from a different perspective. That to me is what encompasses revolutionary love. The word revolution in itself means that you are trying to dismantle a system of being, whether it be economic, doesn't necessarily have to be economic. When we're talking about love, the traditional ways of love may not necessarily be working for us. So a constant, I think, analysis of what that looks like, the messages that we got growing up, what was acceptable, what wasn't, and challenging those. And, I like to say, just flip it to the other side instead of trying to go maneuver through something that's just going to take a while. Just flip it on its backside, do the opposite of it, and see how that works. That's worked for me anyways, once I figured it out.
Yeah. Thank you. And I know earlier you also mentioned you're involved with various groups, and you support various groups as well. And so I think all of the groups that you're part of are trying to move our communities forward to heal, to liberate, and to advocate for our communities. And I think they're all part of the movimiento, And so when you look at all these groups that you're part of, how do you think like all of these groups or all of our people could better center revolutionary love in the movimiento as we move forward?
Okay, sorry, Hermana, because like halfway there, it cut out a little bit. I don't know if it's on my end or not.
Okay.
I didn't quite get the question.
Oh, sorry. So it was more so like, how can we better center revolutionary love in the movimiento?
So I feel like there's a few things that we could do. And by no means I'm not some huge expert. This is just my opinion. But I think stepping outside again of our own struggle, because we talk about unity all the time, but when we're united, what are we doing outside of staying with our own comfort zone? Get outside of your comfort zone, talk to people that didn't grow up where you grew up, or their experiences were different. Talk to them. In terms of organization, for me, one of the beauties has been literally, I will be in 1 week, I might get on 3 different study groups. So for example, the past week, it was the Partido study group that we have on Wednesdays. And then we had a Rainbow Coalition study group. And then there was a Brown Beret group as well. And all 3 of them touched on this exact same thing. We talked about the exploitation of labor, specifically the children. We talked about there was something else there that was very specific to that, but it all wove together. And if you just are speaking to people that look like you and have your similar experiences, that's all that you're going to get. What I love about what I see happening throughout the country is that people are stepping outside of their comfort zone and seeing that the myth that's thrown out there that Black people, their struggles different from ours. There are differences, but there are also a lot of similarities. And the one thing that we do have in common is the same enemy. It's the same oppressor, and we also have internal contradictions, and we have the external contradictions, but seeing people come together, and not just come together just to sing kumbaya, but to actually do to struggle together, to have the hard conversations, that to me is revolutionary love, putting in the work to get there. How do we come to the solutions? And again, that part of it is me having to work on my own stuff. I'm constantly evolving. I will fail as a person, I know that. But when I can say to another person who is also, involved in the movimiento, please, if you see me moving in a certain way, that's not right, or you want to challenge me on something, or I gave information that was wrong, please correct me, so that we can have that kind of conversation. I think too many times we're easily offended we're quick to cancel people. I just don't want to talk to so and so anymore. You know, we have fallen out, we have divisions. You know, this group won't talk to this group, or they're putting each other on blast. You know, I think that we could do a little bit better on, you know, just having those conversations, always guided and coming from a place of revolutionary love. And what that means is, it's not about me. It's not about me being right. You know, it's about what is right and what do we need to do for people to move forward.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. So as we talk about revolutionary love, I think often this is seen in a sense, or like the nurturing or the love or the compassion is usually seen as like a gender dynamic. How do you feel like we can non-gender this? Like, how do you feel we can move this across non-binary, are also our you know men, you know, folks that, like, I guess you could say more masculine, right? Where it's not seen as like, oh, they're, you know, they're supposed to have a different persona. And then women are supposed to be more like nurturing or loving or compassionate. How do you feel like we can move this across genders, across non-binary, etc.?
I think simply speaking up when we see it happening. You know, if I see it happening, whether it be it's happening to me, or I see it happening to within other people, being able to speak up. I think the hard part is speaking up in a loving and respectful manner, you know,
Yeah.
because at that point, usually when we act in anger, it's because somebody has violated a value of ours. Or we feel like we're not being heard, we're trying to be subdued. And so many times we will react to that. So I would say that that would be the way to do it, is call it out. Don't be afraid to call it out, because, you know, one of the other things that we tend to do many times is, for the sake of unity, we won't say anything, you know.
Yeah.
Um, from my personal experience, depending on where I'm at in my healing, there have been times where I second guess myself. You know, something will happen and my gut immediately will say that did not feel right. But, you know, some people are more subtle with their you know, sexism, or, you know, macho kind of, you know, thinking. It's more subtle, it's not so in your face. um and I think those are the more challenging times. But I think, so one, calling it out, and I think there's a way to do that, you know, if possible, do it with the person that it happened with. You know, do it with the person in private, do it with that person, have that conversation and say, hey, you know, this happened here, this is how it felt to me, I want to talk to you about it, I don't want this to be something that moving forward affects, you know, our being able to build together. Try that first. If that doesn't work, then you have to try other things, you know, either you know, and this is the beauty about being in an organization, you bring it back to the collective, bring it back to the group. But again, also doing it, I'm very big on giving people an opportunity to self-correct, to do better, you know. And I think sometimes we offend people or we act in a certain way, we don't even realize that we're doing it, you know. And so if somebody says to me, hey, you know, what you did sounded sexist or dismissive of this, or whatever it may be, I have to be able to be open to hearing that. I can't just expect that to be a one-way street. It has to be both ways, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Um, and so, as you know, everybody in here today is, you know, active in the movimiento and in our communities. And so when we talk about revolutionary love, we also talk about self-love, right? And so what are some strategies you've utilized that maybe would be helpful to the collective in utilizing as we continue moving forward to revolutionize for ourselves, and maybe some practices that you would encourage or that maybe you even do for yourself to remember to recenter, to ground, to love yourself, you know, in la lucha, in the struggle.
Mm, yeah, that one is a deep question. That's a deep question because, you know, while we all have different, you know, our day-to-day life looks different, you know. For me, as I shared, I have my two older kids, which, you know, I raised them as teenagers, but now I have my second set and I feel like I'm doing it all over again. Like literally, they're very similar to my two older kids. Um, and so trying to balance that out, making sure that I'm not neglecting my baby's needs, because I'm so involved in other things that are important as well, but trying to find the balance. Um, the other part is taking care of our health, and I mean that in every sense of the word. You know, what we're eating, what we're putting into our bodies, what we're feeding ourselves, you know, with all of our senses, not just one way. um, but I feel like it's a constant analyzing. You know, you can't just, my particular lifestyle is like schedule. It's like schedule, write it in this time, this time, this time. And, you know, it tends to neglect some of the stuff that you aren't necessarily a task. So I would say it's having to intentionally slow down. And for me, the struggle is not waiting until I'm at a point where I'm like, oh my God, it's so much, I gotta slow down. Now it's like we need to be more proactive about slowing things down so that we don't burn out, because we know that I think every single one of us that are in the movimiento, none of us are saying, you know, have the intention of doing this for 3 years. We don't do this like, oh, it's going to take me, 4 years to get my bachelor's.
Yeah.
Um, we don't, it's not that way. It is a way of life for us. And I think intention wise, we have the intention of this is there for the rest of my life. This is what I want to do. I like to say this: when it comes to revolutionary love, we talk about what is it that we live for. So people will ask you questions like, what is it that you do for a living? And I tend to see who it is that's asking me that question, because sometimes that question actually means, tell me what you do so that I know how to treat you. Tell me what you do so I know where you fall on the ladder.
Yeah.
For some people, I'll tell them I fight for the liberation of my people. What is it that you do? Because when you know that somebody's just trying to degrade you, you throw them back a question, and it's like, it doesn't matter what you tell me you're doing, then nothing is going to, nothing's going to top off the answer of, I'm fighting for my people. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a lot of
Yeah.
comments pop up, and I'm kind of curious to see, like, what people are sharing.
Yeah. And right now we're gonna go ahead and open it up to everybody on the call. If you'd like to unmute, or even share your comment. But yes, there's a lot of comments. Can you see them, hermana, or do you want me to read them out loud?
You can, sis. I'm gonna pull them up right now.
Okay. So a lot of folks commented on your story earlier, saying that, let's see, sorry, my computer's taking forever. A lot of claps, fire emojis. Tonacin says, adelante mujer, blazing your own journey and path. And a chingona one, let's see, what you shared is so important because I think many can relate to your experience. Raised my son as a single mom too. Oh, cool, you can reply to people's messages.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yes, we all have more in common than the system would like to make us think. Sister Vero, thank you for your time and your beautiful history. Yes, the divisions, the way we know now were started by imperialism. Viva Vero, que viva. Your point about focusing on individual versus collective and who to blame. That's beautiful. A lot of claps, hearts, powerful. Yes, talk to people versus about people, calling in versus calling out. Calling out is important, but it should begin in private. On a Zoom, it can be in chat, private, or text, so it's not public. That allows the person opportunity to explain. Finding the balance is the hardest things to do. I'm still struggling at times with that. I think we all do sometimes. Yes, and calling out, not out of frustration or other intense emotions. And also, we just have to be okay processing being called out. It's not the worst in the world. LOL. We can grow in there. Classes, yep, classism. I tell them, I tell them I do as little as possible. I think that's to your last. I'll ask you what you do. But we can open the floor now as well. Folks can unmute, and you can keep putting in the chat. Joe just said, it's nice we all have something in common and can relate to your life experiences. Que vivan las mujeres, que vivan.
Que viva.
All right, and we can open it up if anybody has anything to say, comments, questions. Rafa?
Yeah, yeah, no, I just want to say first of
I'll
all,
start talking again.
no, no, that was impressive. And I know Vero, I've known her for a while now, and it's impressive to hear your story. And I want to say that, you know, for those who don't know, last year when the Valde families asked for help to organize something against the police department, it was the first time all the families will be together. People weren't sure what was going to happen. One of the first people when we got there, the Texas Brown Braves from all over Texas, they got there. They organized this awesome, you know, security team to put this together and to help the families. And Veronica was there, and I know Veronica was leading the chats. I always have to say that because it really gave the families, the familias, confidence in us and in the movement that we're here, because a lot of them never even got involved. I think, Vero, you're part of that when they're seeing us, you know, take the lead, you know, because they couldn't, they were frustrated, but you and others definitely were taking the lead on this, and it was an awesome day for them. And for, I would say for the movimiento, Raza Unida, Brown Berets, etc. But, you know, I'll ask you this because as a mother, and I heard you say, you know, your mother now to a second set of kids, and we're living at a time with, you know, where guns are a big issue. Shootings have overtaken car accidents and other accidents as the #1 killer of teenagers. What is your opinion? And I know what a lot of us feel on self-defense, but what's your opinion on the approach to trying to bring this under control, this crazy mess that's happening here in this country, not all over the world, just here, just in these borders, and more specifically to our children, Black and brown, right? What do you have any thoughts, any comments? Especially I'd like to hear from you as a mother. Gracias.
Thank you, hermano. I mean, yeah, I think that again is one of those topics that we can talk for hours on this and go back and forth on a few different things. But, you know, I find the irony of it is that we could have something as simple as, you know, because it's turned so much into the gun control thing, right? Which I'm not saying is not necessary of a conversation, but we can go to something as simple as an escape route, a little door that could be put in the walls in each classroom that would be an exit out the building. You know, we're missing the simple stuff because we're thinking about the more complex things. We really should be thinking simple to complex. the problem is the system. The system gives a shit about our kids. That's the problem. That Robb Elementary School was built for the kids that they didn't want to be around the good kids, the more deserving kids. So it's a bigger systemic issue, but at the same time, today, what do we do today? And what I would do is I would encourage every single person on this call, and of course, any other people that will see this later, get involved in your local organizations. Get involved, get in, because that's where the conversations of strategy happen. They don't happen on a venue like this. Those happen with people. They come from the people. We plan, organize, strategize. So I won't say much more than that, because then I think I speak too much on the subject. Yeah.
No, and I want to,
But-
let you know that as an educator, for those I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for 23 years, and I've had students in my classroom with guns, and I think, Vero, you're dead on. You're I shouldn't say dead on, but you're right on when you say local, get involved locally. And as an educator, I could tell you all, if you're a parent out there, you've got power at the local level. Organizing with local parents, you have got power. I'm telling you, don't ever forget that. Thank you, Vero.
Sí, hermano, and I want to just add to that. We have things that are continuing to happen. Some of these things, like the situation that just happened here when they were doing the walkouts in Uvalde this past week. You brought it to our attention. I hadn't even heard of it, hermano, until you put it out there, and we heard from the from the familias, but we can't just lean so much on ideology and that conversation, and not strategize and do practical, what are we doing now? But we have to do it in an organized fashion. We have to be, know what it is that we're doing, instead of being spontaneous and being, reactive, because, who doesn't get upset when we see these things that are happening, and they will continue to happen. That's not going to stop. The enemy's not going to say, oh, well, let me find it in my heart to do a little bit better today. That's just not going to happen. What does need to be different is the way that we organize and we move together, in a unified, like Letty had pointed out earlier this week, and in a strategic manner.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat by Uhuru. When I first met you, I introduced you to George Jackson, Mao Zedong, Frantz Fanon, and others. How important is it in revolutionary love to have a partner or mate who is just as involved in the principles you align yourself with in the struggle?
That's my honey, everybody. It's everything. Everything that happens in our day-to-day life is based on the same foundation, and yes, you're right. He introduced me to George Jackson. I didn't know who George Jackson was. I didn't know who Mao was. I hadn't heard of a lot of people, the people that we learn from, but it is absolutely important. I've even heard in other organizations where they will go to an extreme of saying, like, if you are going to be in leadership, you have to be, if you are going to be with somebody, a couple, it has to be somebody who is aligned with us in the struggle. It cannot be somebody who is just conscious or just not involved at all. I think me personally, it won't work, because for us, that is our way of life. It's a priority, and you will be meeting constant resistance all the time. You're going to be having a battle in your own home over
Yeah.
what's important and what's not important, and why are you spending so much time there, and who's that person over there, because you just don't even trust them, you know, because the person really isn't trying to get involved with you. I would say that the other thing is, same point that we had talked about earlier, is within the healing, you know. Yes, we're a united front, but also giving each other the space to learn, to heal, to grow, to be our best selves, you know.
Yeah.
So yes, Shabazz, absolutely important, and thank you for
Thank-
bringing that up, and thank you for being here and supporting me and supporting la causa.
Thank you. Eduardo Rocha says police and military need gun control. We need political education. Then Myra says, all cute, Veronica and Uhuru, we need this in the movement too. Eduardo says, George Jackson and Angela Davis. Hashid, power couples, Iris, Joe, que viva la causa. All right, we still have a couple more minutes if anybody has any additional questions or would like to throw something in the chat. You can feel free to unmute yourself. You don't have to raise your hand.
Well, I'm usually a shy person, but I don't hear nobody say nothing. So let me say something. Gracias, hermana. That was a very nice presentation that you did today. Starting back from your early roots of your memories as a child, going to the local Mexican restaurant, or like the one that you said of the man that till he was 92 that passed out free meals. I heard something about that. There was also a Mexican restaurant where a lady did that here in Denver. So that was nice. And then you mentioned El Paso, Texas. And I think you even mentioned Cahuila or Cahuitecans.
Mhm.
So we share similar family lines because my families are from that area. So that's what I was saying. We can really relate as brothers and sisters across the nation to the same struggles. And when we were talking about revolutionary love, I really like the part that you brought out, that first we need to work within ourselves, within our own family units, and then our communities, and then our counties, then our states, and then we can go take things to Washington, D.C. So like, I really like the way you brought it out. So anyway, I just wanted to say something because nobody was saying nothing. Viva la causa, que viva las hermanas, and it was so nice to be here today. And with that said, I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Joe. Que vivan. We have some things in the chat. Let's see. Letty says, having the revolutionary love between you two is so beautiful, and thank you for sharing. Can you touch on some of the responsibilities of the Vanguard? And then Grace Lee Boggs and James Boggs. And then another question is, how do you feel fighting for the liberation of our peoples has affected your mental health? And then Rafa says, I too like the question about responsibility, especially when it comes to adventurism in the movement. So you have a couple questions here too. You want to touch on those? The first one was to touch on some of the responsibilities of the Vanguard.
Okay, so I mean, I think typically when we speak of the Vanguard Party, we're talking about defense, self-defense, you know, and collective defense, and what does that look like? I would invite every person on here to, because there's so much to cover, but it's a short period of time, and I do believe this thing cuts off at some point, doesn't it, Hermana?
Yeah.
We have a time frame?
At 12.
Okay, so yeah, keeping that in mind, I would invite everybody, if you have not jumped on to the Partido study group, the Brown Beret study group, get on, because that's where this education is coming from. the responsibilities of the vanguard, what is the responsibility of a political party, how do you make yourself relevant to the people. And we have so many people, some of them I see on this call today, but there are others who are not and bring so much information. So I would just say, keep coming to the study groups. It's coming. It's coming. Myra, I just saw your comment. Since we're on the topic of that question of the vanguard, did you have something that you wanted to? Myra's one of our people that I always look to for answers when I'm a little shaky on something or not sure how to word it. And maybe Myra can't.
Oh,
Okay. There you are, sis.
yeah, I'm just like everyone else seeking answers together collectively. For words like vanguard and vanguardism, I just think it's worth a whole separate conversation where we take time to define vanguardism and ask one another what we each think it means, and come to some agreement on what it really means when we talk about it.
I'd agree, sis. Yeah, I'd agree. And I think naturally that's going to be coming here with the MLM study group that we're doing. Okay. And what was the next question? There's three, right?
How do you feel fighting for the liberation of our peoples has affected your mental health?
I'll say this, Hermana. You know, part of sharing my story, and this was actually the first time that I actually sat down and wrote out sharing aspects of my story. Usually it'll be just like a specific piece and it's for a specific purpose. This one was a little bit more generalized, but the traumas were already there, you know. So when we talk about mental health, you know, the stuff that we have going on that affected us as children, as young adults throughout our lives, that's one aspect. And for those of us who come into the struggle later, what ends up happening is that while we're naive and new, I would say, we make mistakes because we think we're helping sometimes and we're not, or we romanticize the struggle and we walk into messes. Because what ends up happening is, I think that because you're in the movement, you're not prone to mistakes like, oh my God, you've been doing this for so long. And so everything that you say just has to be truth and fact. And so I don't challenge you because I'm in a space where I'm not necessarily knowing my own truth. So I look at you like, oh, you've been doing this for so long. And then I'm misguided, you know, and that can happen. So I think that for me has been one of the biggest lessons, especially in the past year, is not doing that. I see that there are so many people that are in the struggle, and when they see me having the tendency to do that, they'll call me out on it and they'll say, Hermana, you know, and they'll have that conversation with me, but it's always in a loving, compassionate way to help my growth. But at the same time, it's and I hate using the word empowering because it's thrown around so much, but it's empowering, you know, when I see that, when, you know, for example, working in mental health every day, I'm hearing stories that I'm like, oh, you know, they touch your soul. They hurt to hear. And I have to hear that without letting it, you know, sometimes it touches my stuff, you know, and the whole idea of leave your stuff at home. That's not realistic. Like that just doesn't happen. I am who I am and I walk in the door with my stuff, you know. but finding some sort of a balance to be able to have that circular healing. And so, you know, like, for example, when I'm at work, I tell people, my goal is that when you walk out of this store, you walk out feeling a little bit better, feeling that there's a little bit more, there's some hope that things are going to get better, or your head held up high, you know, something. You are going to walk out better out of this room than the way that you walked in. And I treat every single person that comes into the office that way. But I tell them, it's not just you, because when you walk out feeling better about yourself, feeling like, okay, there are some concrete things that I can do about these material conditions that we're dealing with, I walk up with my head out too, you know? So it's not a top down, I'm on this side of the desk, so I know everything. No, most people, the beauty of it is seeing how they come in. They're not feeling good. That's why they're walking into a mental health clinic, but they know their own truths. And so for me, I see myself as a weaver and a guider. You just have to tap into it, you know. Hermana,
Talking.
oh, okay. I was like, are you on mute, sis? Because I can't hear you.
Yeah, I was talking and I was on mute. My bad. Sorry. I just wanted to say thank you. I know we're at 12 o'clock already, but I wanted to thank you, Vero, for being our guest speaker today, for sharing your story with us, and so much inspiration today. We love you so much, Hermana, and we're so thankful to have you part of our circle, our community, the movimiento, leading the state of Texas. You know, so we're so thankful for you, and thankful for all the knowledge that you've imparted on us today, to keep you know, the aspect of revolutionary love alive in la lucha and the struggle, in the movimiento. So thank you all for joining. If you want to unmute on your way out, say any comments, please feel free to do so. Vero, if you have any last comments or words for us, feel free as well.
Just that it was an honor to be here today, and to be able to share some of my story. And believe it or not, it helps move things forward for me, because it's been a couple of decades that I've thought about writing a book, and sharing my story. And doing this, going through this process of writing this up for me, help shape how I would write it. There's things in there that I learned about myself as I was writing it. So I thank you all for the opportunity, and you all know that I love every single one of you, and we build together. That's what we do, and we'll keep doing it. So que viva la raza y que viva la lucha hasta la victoria.
Que viva.
Que viva.
Que viva la causa.
Que viva.
Thank you, Vero.
A ti, hermano, gracias.
Gracias, Vero.
Oh,
Thank you, Vero.
Aquí estoy para servir. And everybody get out into that sun. Get your feet in the ground. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Igualmente.
Especially us light-skinned ones.
It's a beautiful day out there.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
is. It
It's a
is.
beautiful
Yeah.
day.
Thank you, Vera.
Gracias.